Hello, I'm Brian Noble, CEO of Family Policy Institute of Washington.
And I'm Brad Payne, president of FPIW Action.
Couple disclaimers before we get started today. Nothing in this video is an endorsement of the candidate, nor the candidate's endorsement of FPIW or FPIW Action. It's simply a public service to meet and greet the candidate.
All right. Well, good morning, Chuck. How are you doing?
I'm great, you guys. How are you doing?
I'm doing
Great.
good. Ready to
Good.
go for another week.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, my first question is a three-parter. If you would give us your name and the position you're running for, and
Mhm.
then tell us a little bit about yourself and your family. And then lastly, if you fill us in on your experience for this position.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Chuck Kepler. I'm running for Clark County Council in District 3. My family's awesome. My wife and I met in high school and got married a couple years out of high school. Had our first kids a couple years later, and we have 8 children, and 6 of our children have joined our family through the foster system. We've always just been people that believe that we're here to make a difference in our community. And so kind of entering a new phase of life with the kids. Our youngest are both seniors in high school, and celebrating in August our grandson's second birthday. And in January, we will welcome our second grandson into the family, and are just super, super excited about that. As far as my experience, it's really varied, man. Like, I've never been able to predict a part of my life, but I've always been a person who's just lived in my faith relationship with God. And what I love is that I've just been able to step into places where I've been able to have an impact, and that's always been my desire. And so, coming out of high school, I worked in a lumber mill for a few years, and then I started a business. I was a residential contractor in Clark County. My wife and I moved here in 2000, and so I was a residential Clark County contractor here for quite a few years. And then when my wife and I were going through the process to become licensed as foster parents and started welcoming foster kids into our home and growing our family that way, I closed the business down and I became an at-home dad for a period of time. As the kids were going into school and then got into full-time school, I was going back to school to enter into vocational ministry. And it was another thing that I would have never predicted, but became an associate pastor at a church of a congregation of about 600 people. And my role there at the church was facilities, being a contractor prior. Of course, they stuck me with the facilities, but finance, and then also pastoral care of that congregation of about 600 people. And so I worked there for 6.5 years, and have also, again, volunteered in the community in many different ways. I was on the policy council for one of the largest nonprofits, or it was the largest nonprofit in Clark County at the time, and was given their Volunteer of the Year award, which was pretty cool, pretty special for me. Um, and then I've also, as you said earlier, I'm the coach. And so I've been coaching in the community for 17 years, 13 years in youth football, and the last 4 years in at Evergreen High School. And through those connections, as a part of the church, we're able to make a lot of connections with the local schools. We serve the local schools in a lot of ways, and we're able to provide everything from after school care for our kids that would get out super early, or our elementary school kids get out super early every Wednesday, to clothing, food, school supplies, just all kinds of supports for our teachers and students. And again, felt that I was being called to make a difference in that way. And so I stepped out of my role as an associate pastor of that church and into a paraeducator role. That's my current job. And I work with at-risk students at the high school that I coach at as well. And so, again, a really varied experience, but I think my experience leads towards the county council really well. I've always handled other people's money. I think other people's money there's a high degree of transparency and accountability that you need to have. I've been able to streamline and find waste in every organization that I've been in terms of finances. And I think that's something I can do at the county level as well. But also just that I'm going to step into a role that I feel like I can make an impact for my community. But also, like, I look at my wife and I, we chose 24 years ago to make this our home and raise our family here. I want this a place where my kids would be willing to say the same thing. And so I just want to continue to see Clark County grow and thrive, as it has in the past.
Excellent. So what is your primary promise to the public if you're elected?
Yeah, so just like we typically do, we break it down into a few things. So lower taxes would be the first thing that I would say. And again, I have a lot of experience in finance. I believe that there's more than enough money in the county budget that we can get everything done without having to put an additional burden, not just on our families, but our small businesses, and to keep tax rates where they're at, not continue to increase them as we've seen in the past years. But also, I think there might be an opportunity to actually lower our tax rates as well and still accomplish everything that we need to accomplish. The other thing that I would say is families first. And by that, I mean, we need to support our local sheriff's office. Clark County per capita has the lowest number of officers of any county in the state of Washington. Everything that I hear from people that I've been talking to is people are calling the police, they're calling 911, and the response they're getting on some of these calls is, we don't respond to that anymore. And that's really sad and really scary, in terms of that. And then the other part, when I say families first, I think we need to look at zoning reform. We need to have affordable housing, but again, we need to have a varied look at housing and not just one style. Like I said, when my wife and I moved to Clark County, we moved here in part because we could get an affordable house that had a little yard that our kids could play in, where we could raise our family in great communities. And I want to continue that. I also think that what we're seeing a lot of is people moving towards multi-generational living, and our current zoning in the county prohibits, is really, really restricted on building an ADU, an additional dwelling unit, on your own property. And I think that's something that needs to be fixed as well. And then the last thing that I would say is that I want to fight against tolls. I don't think an $8 billion bridge is a fiscally responsible option. I think there are other options that cost less and that it can be done without tolls. Tolls are just another way to tax the working families that are, and those are the people that it's going to impact the most and it's going to harm the most.
All right. What do you feel like, Chuck, differentiates you the most from your opponents?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to those same things that I said, and I appreciate my opponent, Will. I feel like that he's been out there just like me. I'm saying, here's what I'm going to do, and I feel like he's been saying that as well. But he says that he will raise taxes. He's on record saying, "Yep, I will raise taxes. We're going to have the 1%. If we need to do tax levies to support these other things, we're going to do that." I think it's a dangerous option and really detrimental to working families and small businesses. We don't entice business owners to Clark County when now the tax rate is 8.7, 8.8 sales tax rate right now in some places. When it costs 10% less to drive 15 minutes across the bridge, people take their business across the bridge. And so I think that's a huge issue. Another thing is just with the county sheriff and protecting families. My opponent is on record saying that he would not, that our jail is built 44 years ago, and it was built for a correction system 44 years ago. And there's current money that's being dedicated there to renovate that jail. So when inmates come in, they can get the services that they need to get out of the cycle that they're in. And my opponent has said he's fully against those funds going to that. Again, this is why I have the endorsement of the Sheriff's Deputies Guild of Clark County. And so that's another place where I think that we're very different. And then the last one that I would say is personal freedoms. And so Will has said a few times that, that he would ban all fireworks and things like that. And I think at one point the quote was that he feels that government has a role in influencing people's behavior. And I don't feel that that's my role as a Clark County councilor. I feel my role as a Clark County councilor is to represent the constituents that have elected me into that position, not to enforce what I think or change what they believe. And we have other situations that are happening. And again, the county doesn't have purview over all of them, but And there's a local road down here, McGilvery, that's being reduced from 2 lanes to one. And the only reason why is because they're trying to get people to take public transit. And I'm like, man, I'm all for public transit. People should have the option to use what they want to use, but I don't think that the government should be influencing those kinds of behaviors.
All right, our fourth and final question is, what did you learn during the primary that positively impacted you during the general election?
Man, I like the process is really hard. Campaigning is really hard, but I got to say that I've loved it so much, and that my team has learned so much. We're not as divided as everybody says we are, right? Like we go into these things, and we worry about, I think, the wrong things. And so for me, stepping into this was not a politician before. This was not a desire of mine to do. I have an opportunity to make a difference where I live, and I want to do that. But I didn't know all the ins and outs of these things. And so some people who do were coming in, they're saying, well, here's the endorsements you need to get. These are big endorsements. But this one place, they only endorse people that say these certain things. And this other place, they only endorse people that say these certain things. And I said, listen, I'm not gonna change who I am. And I've always been a person of my word. So I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna tell them who I am. And if they're on board with that, great. And if they're not, that's fine, but they get to make an informed decision, and that's okay. But I walked away with big endorsements. Like I said, the Sheriff's Deputy Guild of Clark County, the Washington Farm Bureau, the Building Industry Association, Clark County Association of Realtors. I don't know. You'd have to go and look and see the last time that somebody got such a varied number of endorsements. But to me, it was really impactful to say, no, listen, we can go and have common sense people doing common sense things. The people that I had that were out canvassing, they were like, man, I loved getting to my neighborhood and talking to people, and everybody's fears that somebody's going to get upset about this or that. And like, no, there's more common ground. There really is, between people
Mhm.
than maybe what's put out there, or we're afraid of. And so seeing those things is awesome. And it's the same thing, like even talking to my friends and family, colleagues and connections, maybe people who have some different political views, but I sit down and ask somebody to volunteer, hey, will you do this for me? And they're like, well, you know that I'm pretty strong with this party. And I'm like, no, I didn't know what your politics were. I just know you're a great person. Like, I love you, you care about people. And they would say the same thing about me. And to me, that's just been a huge impact as we're going forward. And so I've just doubled down and said, listen, I'm gonna be the person that I am, a person of character and integrity. I've lived a life where I've been able to serve my community through sacrifice. I haven't had to pick a job in a long time based on the amount of money that I make, but I get to choose that job based on the impact that I can have. And so it'd be the same thing here, where I'm stepping into this. They call it a part-time position, but I'll be leaving my position at the school so I can invest everything that I have into my Clark County counselor role. And like my opponent's not saying, my opponent's like, nope, I'm still going to work my job over here and do this. And but I think it's huge in terms of the amount of support, and I feel like the people resonating with just a common sense message from a real life person has been really, really encouraging for me.
Good.
All right. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you for sharing with our listeners. We appreciate it. We wish you much luck in the last few weeks of your campaigning.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys having me.
All right. Well, I'm Brad Payne with FPIW Action.
And I'm Brian Noble with FPIW. For the reminder, nothing in this video is an endorsement of the candidate, nor the candidate's endorsement of FPIW or FPIW action. Like we like to say around here, go out there and defend and advance biblical values in the public square. God bless.